Hello and welcome to our show, The Purple Couch. My name is Maria and I'm your host today, and with me I have Lucia Volk, Professor of International Relations and Director of Middle East and Islamic Studies here at San Francisco State University. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here.
That's good. All right, so you just published this new book, Unsettling Middle Eastern Refugees, Regimes of Exclusion and Inclusions in the Middle East, Europe and North America, with Professor Marcia Inhorn from Yale University. So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, we are living through a time when there are more refugees than there have ever been in the entire history that we have counted refugees. So with 80 million, and the numbers are going up, and at the same time we're not paying attention anymore. So we have COVID to distract us, we have economic problems to distract us, and all sorts of other political issues. And my colleague and I, Professor Inhorn and I, felt we needed to refocus the conversation on refugees. In 2015, everybody paid attention.
Yeah.
6 years later, the situation is worse and nobody's paying attention. So that's why this book was conceived, and we put together a team of 16 scholars. All of them are doing research on this book, and we're pretty happy with what we were able to produce.
Do you think COVID has had a negative effect of the media representation of the refugee
well,
right now?
Overall, the media always moves on to the next thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really gives an issue prolonged attention.
Yeah.
And so we have a refugee problem that, because of ongoing wars and now, drought and instability and the entire mess in Afghanistan, the withdrawal of American troops. We have an ongoing war in Yemen. We have Syrian civil war. We have the Libyan crisis. Everything is getting worse, not better, in the Middle East. But I think there's a fatigue, American audience fatigue of Middle Eastern problems. I think right now we withdrew from Afghanistan supposedly, so now the problem is solved. But the problems are not solved, and we need to continue to pay attention.
Yeah, that's true. So while writing this book, what are some surprising things or challenges refugees face in Europe, mostly, that most people might not know about?
Yeah, so the book is, distinguishes between refugees who live in the Middle East, like Turkey and Jordan, where most of the challenges are purely economic, so subsistence. I mean, how do you live day to day, and who's going to bring you your food and your water and your shelter? By the time that refugees make it to the United States and Europe, they are falling under refugee regimes. They're entitled to certain, they have rights to be taken in, to have a livelihood, and to get a hearing. Asylum law means the states they're in must give them a hearing, and for the duration of the hearing, they are taken care of. They have, in Germany, they get, apartments, they get German classes, they get medical checkups, they get people who check in on them and make sure they're okay. So the surprising findings, I think, for all of us are that the refugees are doing a lot of work getting through the asylum system. Yeah. They see how it tries to keep them out, and they're working very hard on getting in. Yeah. And so they're not just displaced and lost and struggling. They are actually extraordinarily proactive in showing Europeans and Americans how asylum is supposed to be done. And I think Europeans and Americans can thank the asylum seekers for reminding them of legal procedures and how to properly process them. So I think that was, for me, a surprising feature. I mean, I am German, I'm a German national, and I certainly was not an expert at German asylum law because it doesn't apply to me, so I had to learn about it, and then I thought, well, we have all this law, why don't we just apply it? Why don't we just use it the way it was intended? Yeah. And there the Germans have a lot of work to do, and other Europeans and Americans have a lot of work to do. So it's sad to say that the asylum seekers are teaching us important lessons, because they should not have to do that.
That's true. So what surprised you the most when you were reading, not for like the readers, but was there anything you stumbled upon where you're like, oh, wow?
The stamina. I mean, the nice thing when you're working anthropologically and you go and you interview people and you see them repeatedly and you check up and see how refugees are doing day to day, you just are surprised of their good humor and their resilience and their strength of, how they're not giving up.
Yeah.
I sometimes felt if I was in their position, I would have surrendered a long time ago, and I don't know what I would have done. But I was continuously surprised at how much willpower and ingenuity there is. They're not working in their own language. They're out of their home, they're in a different cultural setting, and they are coming up with all sorts of creative solutions.
That's true.
And that I found extremely heartening. I also should say there's a lot of bad press about xenophobia, how Europeans are racist and hate refugees, but it's also not that black and white. We have all sorts of examples of citizens in Europe rising to the occasion and advocating and doing whatever they can to help refugees get settled.
That's good to know.
And I also wanted to give a little bit more attention to that side of it, because we want to do more of all this positive stuff that's happening and maybe not focus all the time on all the negative, because then we get cynical and we just stop caring.
That's true. Have you been in contact with any of your interview persons since the book came out?
Regularly. I mean, that's the nice thing about working anthropologically. You meet people and you get to know them, and they stay with you for quite a while. I have friendships from my graduate student anthropological work, and I 30 years later still talk to them and check in on their birthdays and holidays, and that is an extraordinarily enriching thing for me as the researcher. That's why I became an anthropologist. You never lose touch with the people you got to know and you wrote about. I mean, I take interest in what becomes of them, right? I want them to do well, and I want to help if I can.
How inspiring. So in your opinion, what is the biggest challenges that the refugee crisis in general is facing right now?
There is a distribution of the main issue is distribution of resources. The Europeans and Americans have resources. They can distribute to refugees to get them settled, to get them job training, to get them started. So on a very basic level, we need to give refugees gladly what we have. And we need to remember that pretty much everybody in the United States and half of Europeans were refugees at one point in time. And somebody helped them. So can we just please be more forthcoming with sharing what we have? Then obviously the second issue is to actively help solve the problems that created the refugees in the first place. European governments and the United States have a lot of power on the global stage, and they need to intervene in, let's say, Syria, in Yemen and other places, and help stop the violence.
Of course.
By number one, they should stop selling armament, and they stop shipping guns over there, but then they have diplomatic channels that they can use and activate. And they, as third-party mediators, can achieve things that the parties themselves cannot. So that's another big role.
You also use in the book the phrase fair share throughout the countries, which Denmark, where I'm from, we're not helping as much as we should compared to how wealthy a country we are. So I think that's really important as well to remember that sharing, because the outer borders of Europe are facing a lot of immigrant problem with the borders being close to there, and then we're just sitting there and being like, hey.
Yes, Denmark is sheltered. Germany too, right?
Yeah.
The brunt of the refugee burden, economically speaking, is borne by Greece and Italy and Spain, and they are the countries that least can afford it. And the rest of Europe is watching, and that is also not okay. So maybe number 3, Europe needs to clean up its act and really work in solidarity. The northern regions in Europe with the southern ones, and the United States needs to step up to its plate, because in the past, if we think back to the Vietnamese, if we think back to Hungarians, the Cubans, there's refugee reception in certain select cases. During the Cold War, it worked. And now that the Cold War is over, then it's like, no, we don't want to take in anybody anymore. And the United States is wealthy enough to share its resources with people who are in desperate position.
So I know it's not an easy fix, but if you could change one thing from this instance, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a really tough question. The one thing...
Only one,
If I could have a wish, I I would just go back in time and fix the problems that created the refugees. Most of these refugees would be happily back where they started. They don't want to be refugees.
No.
So I would time travel and undo the wars that created them. And maybe go back even further, undo some of the inequality that created the wars. Okay, how far back in time can we go?
Really big fix, yeah. Well, you're allowed to dream here.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the chance.
So why is this book important for everybody who wants to read it?
The most important thing, take-home thing from this book is to remind the readers that the responsibility is not with the refugees to integrate and behave and be somehow less threatening. The responsibility is with the receiving countries who created the problems that created the refugees and who have, in a way, set up the obstacle course for the refugees to go through to get to asylum. And so it is not so much, we need to understand the refugees, but we need to also understand the role that host countries and European and American governments have in doing better. And that's what the book's about.
Very wise words. Well, Lucia, thank you so much for coming on our show today. And be sure to read the book here, and you can get it on Berkhan or Amazon, or check out the newest version of the open access journal Anthropology of the Middle East, which Lucia guest edited on the topic of refugees. That's also on Berkhan. So thank you for watching, and see you soon.